"You don't look like you belong in here," she scoffed, loud enough for the whole line to hear. Jason Statham stood still in front of the polished marble counter of a downtown bank, wearing worn boots and a faded flannel shirt. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The bank employee, young, smug, and clearly judging the man by his looks, waved him off like a stray dog. But behind that quiet stare was a storm. "You think I came here for money?" Jason said. "I came here for truth." What started as a routine transaction would uncover something rotten deep inside this institution, and Jason wasn't leaving quietly. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. There was a kind of peace that only comes from earning every inch of your life. Jason Statham knew that peace well. His days began before sunrise, the hiss of a kettle on an old gas stove filling the quiet of his cabin tucked deep in the Montana woods. The air smelled like pine and yesterday's sawdust. Outside, his rusted Ford pickup sat parked beside a hand-painted sign that read Statham Repair and Sons, though there were no sons. Just Jason, and a long list of neighbors who swore they'd be out of a home if not for his hands. He fixed what others threw out. Lawnmowers, gutters, broken porch steps, tired heating units. Never charged what he should have. And when the job was done, he'd sit with folks on their porches, drink lemonade, and ask about their grandkids. That's who Jason was. But there was one thing left undone. Something that kept tapping on his conscience late at night. He'd spent years setting aside every spare dollar, not for himself, but for the kids in town. Some had nothing but trouble waiting for them after school. Others were just one broken family away from the system swallowing them whole. Jason had a plan to change that, not with speeches, not with sermons, just with action. He called it the Statham Fund, a quiet grassroots scholarship program to help kids afford trade school, community college, even tutoring if they needed it. No fancy board, no hidden agenda. Just help. So when the time came, he loaded up his financial records, legal documents, and a thick manila folder of handwritten letters from kids he'd mentored over the years. He was heading to the city. Not to ask for money, but to open a charity account at the most reputable bank in the region. The kind that made big claims about equity, access, and inclusion. Downtown was a different world. Steel and glass, parking garages taller than grain silos back home. But Jason didn't flinch. He parked on the street, tucked his papers under one arm, and walked through the revolving doors of Redwood and Trust. Inside, it was all marble, gold trim, and buzzwords. Screens on every wall showed images of smiling families and bold taglines. Everyone welcome, every voice heard. Jason stood in line, patient as ever, watching a young man in a designer blazer guide customers like a maitre d'. He noticed something strange. Some people were being escorted to private rooms, others told to wait. But Jason didn't think much of it. He just hoped the papers were enough. He wasn't here for favors. He wasn't here for status. He was here to do good. And that was the day he learned. Doing good doesn't mean you'll be treated good. The moment Jason stepped up to the counter, it was like flipping a switch. A young woman in a sleek pantsuit eyed him with the kind of smirk that doesn't show teeth, just attitude. Her nameplate read Delaney B., but her tone said more than her badge ever could. She didn't greet him. She didn't even ask what he needed. Instead, she glanced at his flannel shirt, his old work boots, and the folder in his hand. Then she cocked her head and asked, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear, "You sure you're in the right place, sir?" Jason held her gaze. Calm, steady. He placed the folder on the counter and replied, "I'd like to open a charitable trust." Delaney didn't touch the folder. She leaned back in her chair like it offended her. "For who?" she asked. Jason nodded once. "For underprivileged kids, trade school funds, scholarships, tutoring." She raised an eyebrow, like the words, Didn't make sense coming from a man like him. Then, like she remembered something funny, she chuckled softly. "And how exactly do you plan to fund that?" Jason didn't move. "I brought the financial records, personal and business." Reluctantly, she slid the folder toward herself with a single finger, then opened it like it might bite. She flipped through the documents without reading. Her eyes weren't looking at the numbers. They were looking for a reason to say no. After a pause, she stood up without explanation and walked to the back, folder in hand. Jason watched her disappear behind frosted glass. He waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Then a man in a slim suit approached. Balding, too much cologne. Clipboard in hand. "You'll need to come back another day," the man said firmly. "We don't open trust accounts without deeper background verification, especially not for clients with cash-heavy small businesses." Jason frowned. "My business is licensed. My taxes are paid. Everything's documented." The man didn't blink. "We just have to be extra careful with rural profiles." Rural profiles. That was the moment it stopped being about paperwork. Jason collected his folder slowly, nodding, once. He turned and walked out, boots striking the marble floor in even, echoing steps. He didn't say a word. But inside, something shifted. He had walked in expecting bureaucracy. He didn't expect to feel like a suspect. Back in his truck, Jason sat quietly. He didn't start the engine. He didn't call anyone. He just stared out the windshield, watching the traffic and the people who'd never be questioned in a place like that. He thought of the letters in his folder, the kids who wrote them, the parents who prayed someone would give their child a chance. He had told them help was coming. That night, Jason laid every document out on his kitchen table. Receipts, letters, forms. He rechecked everything, hoping. Maybe he had made some mistake. He hadn't. The next morning, he sat at his computer and typed Redwood and Trust discrimination complaints. What he found wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there. Quiet threads, Yelp reviews with vague references, posts in neighborhood forums, clients describing strange, unspoken delays, extra forms, suddenly closed applications, most of them from rural or working-class backgrounds, most of them dismissed. Without a clear reason, Jason kept digging. The deeper he looked, the more the patterns began to line up. He wasn't the first, and if he didn't do something, he wouldn't be the last. The next week, Jason Statham drove from diner to diner, hardware, store to hardware store, asking quiet questions with patient eyes. He didn't bring a microphone. He brought coffee, a listening ear, and the story of what happened to him inside Redwood and Trust. That's when the stories started pouring out. A retired school janitor who tried to open a small loan to fix her roof, denied. A young couple who moved from a farming town just trying to open a joint account, frozen. A war vet, clean record, turned away for incomplete documentation that was never explained. They all had one thing in common. They didn't fit the image Redwood and Trust wanted walking through their doors. Jason took notes. He didn't push, just listened. Each story felt like another nail, another confirmation that this wasn't personal. It was policy. By Thursday, Jason returned to the bank. Same shirt, same boots, same worn folder. He asked to speak to Delaney again. This time, she didn't fake the smile. "I thought we already explained." Jason cut her off, calm and quiet. "This time I'm recording just so we're clear." She hesitated, then forced a laugh. "Sir, I don't consent to being recorded." Jason hit stop. "Then maybe your boss will." He turned and asked to speak to a branch manager. They refused again, not because of documents, not because of policy, but because, in their words, people like him attract scrutiny. Jason took that recording and walked straight to the office of a local financial journalist, a man named Ellis, who ran a small but respected newsletter called The Ledger Post. Ellis wasn't interested at first. He'd heard dozens of complaints about bad service. But when he heard the audio, the way Jason was spoken to, the deliberate condescension, the insinuations, his posture changed. "What exactly do you want out?" "Of this?" Ellis asked. Jason looked him in the eye. "I want them to explain to a judge why dignity has a dress code." Ellis started pulling threads. Over the next few days, Jason worked with him behind the scenes, sending contacts, sworn statements, pointing Ellis toward victims with paperwork, and then a bombshell. Ellis discovered internal whistleblowers, willing to talk, off record. Employees had been trained to flag non-conforming clients under a vague but powerful policy called perceived risk screening. Translation: if you didn't look like their usual clientele, you got flagged. If you asked questions, you got ignored. And if you pushed, you got denied. Jason didn't just want the truth uncovered, he wanted the people hurt to be seen, not by banks, not by lawyers, but by the people who actually mattered. The community. He organized a town hall, informal, in the back of a high school gym. 30 folding chairs, a box of donuts, and a quiet invitation to speak. 17 people showed up, not to listen, to share. Stories came out like bruises finally exposed to the sun. People cried, not because they'd lost money, but because they'd been made to feel like they didn't belong in their own country. Jason didn't say much that night, but when it was over, he handed everyone there a printout of the complaint he'd filed with the state banking board. Then he said, "You can sign it, or don't. I'll still show up." By the end of the week, it had over 50 signatures. The story went public the next Monday. Ellis published a headline that cut through the noise. "When did integrity become a liability?" Redwood and Trust issued a tight-lipped statement denying wrongdoing, blaming miscommunications, and procedural misunderstandings. But no one was buying it anymore. Jason watched it all from the same wooden porch he built years ago. He wasn't smiling. Not yet, because he knew they hadn't truly faced the truth. Not until they looked him in the eye again. It was a Tuesday, cold but dry. The kind of morning that didn't ask for attention, but got it anyway. Jason Statham parked across the street from Redwood and Trust and shut off the engine. He didn't look at the bank. Not yet. Instead, he looked in the rearview mirror at the 4 people stepping out of the cars behind him. Maria, the retired school janitor. Eli, the farmer's son turned mechanic. Darnell, the Marine. And Holly, the mom who got denied a college savings account for her twins. They didn't dress up. They didn't rehearse. They just came as they were. That was the whole point. Together, they crossed the street and stepped through the revolving doors. The lobby fell quiet, not because of who they were, but because of who was with them. Jason wasn't loud. He wasn't angry. He walked up to the same counter, same marble floor, same air of superiority behind the glass. Delaney was there. She saw him first. Her expression flickered, a hint of panic beneath a polished smile. "Sir, you'll need to schedule an appointment." Jason set down a folder, same folder, different contents. "I'm here for accountability," he said plainly, "and I brought company." Behind him, the others stepped forward and placed their denial letters on the counter, each one marked with vague language and generic excuses. Jason opened his folder and laid out transcripts. Phone logs, sworn statements, everything backed up, everything time-stamped. Delaney's voice cracked. "You can't just come in here like this." Jason leaned forward, not threatening, just clear. "You had your chance to handle this quietly. You chose otherwise." The manager appeared, summoned by nervous whispers. Same slick suit, same smug tone. "You're trespassing," he said, quickly. "If you don't leave now, I'll call security." Jason didn't blink. Do it. Just make sure the cameras are rolling when you do." And that's when the doors opened behind them. Ellis stepped in first, followed by a cameraman and a local reporter with a mic already live. Their faces said it all. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to document. The bank lobby froze. The manager's mouth opened, then closed. The smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course," he stammered. "We're happy to review these applications again." Jason cut him off. "I didn't come for a redo. I came for the truth." He pointed to the folder. "Every denial, every delay, every profile flagged with no legal cause. This isn't a service error. It's discrimination with a suit and a slogan." The cameras caught every word. People started gathering outside. Phones came out. A few employees tried to disappear into back rooms. But it was too late. The story had a face now. 4, in fact, and one man standing with them who refused to flinch. Ellis stepped forward with a final question for the manager. "Do you deny that your internal risk screening flagged these individuals based solely on perceived background and appearance?" The manager froze. Delaney looked down. Jason stood taller. Silence hung like a verdict. When no answer came, Ellis turned to the camera and said, "You've just seen it for yourself. Redwood and Trust, where some clients are welcome and others are quietly erased." Jason turned to leave. So did the others. No shouting, no violence, just truth, heavy and undeniable. By nightfall, the footage had been picked up by 3 regional networks and a national financial watchdog. Social media lit up like wildfire. Redwood and Trust tried to spin it, claimed it was a local training failure, promised swift corrective action, but people weren't listening anymore. They were watching Jason because he hadn't gone in to make a scene. He'd gone in to make a point, and now the entire country could see it. Have you ever felt completely powerless until you realized you weren't alone? Share your story below. You never know who you might help just by speaking up. The hearings were scheduled for the following month, formal, televised. And this time, nobody at Redwood and Trust got to hide behind emails or slogans. The banking board called it an ethics review. The public called it something else, reckoning. Jason Statham didn't want to speak. He never liked the spotlight. He believed in fixing things quietly, like broken gutters or busted generators. But this wasn't just a repair job anymore. This was something deeper, something that needed to be said out loud. So when the call came, asking if he'd testify on behalf of the clients who were denied, profiled, and dismissed, Jason didn't hesitate. He ironed his shirt, packed the same manila folder, and flew out to the state capitol. The chamber was packed. Reporters in the back row. Bank lawyers on one side, polished and prepared. Jason sat across from them, calm, still, holding a legal pad full of names. Not stats, not summaries. Names. When they asked why he was there, he answered in a voice that felt like gravel and warmth all at once. "I came here today not because I was denied service, but because I watched what that denial did to people who already thought they didn't matter." He paused. Let it breathe. There's a kind of damage that doesn't show up on paper. The kind that tells a man he's not welcome before he's even spoken. I saw it in their eyes. I heard it in their stories. He looked across the aisle, directly at the bank executives, and I felt it in that lobby when a young woman decided what kind of person I was before she knew my name. A panel member leaned forward. "Mr. Statham, in your opinion, what should happen now?" Jason nodded slowly, voice steady. "I don't want apologies. I want accountability. I want every policy that gave someone like Delaney the confidence to humiliate a stranger reviewed and rewritten. I want a list of every client denied in the past 3 years given a second look, with dignity this time. I want training that doesn't just check boxes, but checks hearts." Murmurs filled the room, but Jason wasn't done. He held up a photo, a grainy shot of a smiling 12-year-old boy next to a science fair project. This kid wanted to be an engineer. His mom came to that bank to open an education account. She left in tears. He lowered the photo. That bank didn't just deny her money, it denied him a future. Across the chamber, a bank representative shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered into a microphone, their voice clipped and corporate. "We regret, if any." Clients felt discouraged by their experience. Jason stopped them cold. Felt discouraged? He repeated. He let the silence carry the weight. You can dress it up with whatever words you want. But at the end of the day, you built a system where someone had to prove they were worth trusting. Not by action, not by record, but by appearance. That line was replayed on every major news outlet by sundown. By week's end, the hearings concluded with damning findings. Redwood and Trust was fined heavily by the state for discriminatory lending practices. But the bigger blow came when 3 former employees, Delaney among them, were publicly named and barred from working in regulated financial institutions for a minimum of 10 years. The CEO issued a nationwide apology. Stockholders fled, board members stepped down, but Jason wasn't watching any of that. He was already back in Montana, hammering nails into a ramp for an elderly vet who couldn't walk up his porch anymore. When a reporter found him and asked, "What does justice feel like?" Jason didn't give some grand quote. He just said, "Feels like the floor stopped creaking under people's feet. Like they can finally stand without being told they don't belong." He didn't go to war. He didn't yell. He just showed up. Again and again. With truth in his pocket and fire in his chest, and that day a man in boots walked into the world of suits. And made it blink. Spring came late that year, as if the earth had waited for something to be made right. Jason Statham pulled into his gravel driveway with the same truck, same boots, same quiet heartbeat. The only thing different was the mailbox, overflowing, with letters, some from strangers, some from families, some from kids with handwriting so messy it made him laugh. "Thank you for helping my mom. I'm going to welding school now." You made them listen. He stacked the letters in a wooden box near the fireplace, not to frame, just to remember. Down the road, things had shifted. The local school board invited Jason to speak at Career Day. They'd always focused on doctors, lawyers, professors. This time, they wanted a man with calloused hands and a clear voice. He told the students, "Respect starts with you, and it ends with how you treat the people no one else notices." He started hosting monthly meetups at the community center, not to preach, just to listen. Young parents came, veterans came, farmers came. They brought stories, questions, and sometimes envelopes with names of people still stuck in quiet battles, with loud systems. Jason would nod, take their name, and say one thing every time: "You're not alone." The scholarship fund he dreamed about finally opened its first round of applications. But it didn't just pay for tuition. It helped cover tools, textbooks, even gas money for kids commuting from the edge of town. A local welder donated shop, space. A retired teacher offered free tutoring. A single mom volunteered to drive kids to class. What Jason started wasn't a charity. It was a ripple, moving through people who'd forgotten they had power. As for Redwood and Trust, the building still stood downtown, but something was missing. The lines were shorter, the smiles more cautious, and the big shiny signs about inclusion, they were gone. A new manager was brought in, someone from out of state, trained to clean up messes quietly. But the name on the building still meant something now, something no billboard could fix. Jason didn't waste energy celebrating their fall. That wasn't the point. The point was that next time someone walked in wearing work boots and honesty, the world might hesitate before judging them. One afternoon, a young woman knocked on Jason's shop door. She looked nervous, holding a wrinkled envelope and a folder that reminded him of the one he once carried. "I heard what you did," she said. "I want to start something too, but I don't know if they'll listen to me." Jason smiled. Not wide. Just enough. Don't ask 'em to listen, he said. Just speak like they already should have. And with that, he handed her the same folder. Refilled, reprinted, ready. Truth wasn't something you owned. It was something you passed on. America's greatest battles don't always happen in the streets. Sometimes they unfold under fluorescent lights, across counters, in the quiet discomfort of being unseen. Jason Statham never wanted to be anyone's symbol. He didn't come from protest. He came from patience, from work done with bare hands and few words. And yet, in a city lobby, where judgment wore a name tag, he stood taller than any protest ever could. He didn't ask for a stage. But when the world tried to shrink him to fit its comfort, he grew in place. Not with volume, but with stillness. Not with rage, but with reason. And the world had no choice but to look again. You see, discrimination doesn't always wear a hood. Sometimes it wears a smile, a policy, a polite delay. It makes you second-guess your own worth. It whispers, maybe you should have worn something nicer, spoken a little softer, waited your turn. But Jason didn't change to earn their approval. He stood as he was and made them confront what they didn't want to see. That's the power of one man who knows who he is. Not because someone gave him permission, but because he never needed it. And if there's one truth worth passing down, it's this. Dignity doesn't dress up. It shows up. It walks through the doors of banks, courts, schools, churches, broken homes, and quiet towns with no armor but its spine. And sometimes it looks like a man in boots who was told he didn't belong, until the whole country realized he did. So if someone ever sizes you up before you've spoken, remember Jason. If a system ever shrinks your worth to a checklist, remember Jason. And if you ever think one voice doesn't matter, look around. Someone's listening. Someone's watching. Someone's waiting for you to stand so they know they can too. Jason Statham didn't teach us how to fight. He reminded us how to stand.